Originally, I began looking at other music magazines and doing research into the forms and conventions of different music magazines. I found that most front covers featured a large masthead, large image of an individual or group, surrounded by cover lines, with perhaps a banner across the front. One magazine I found particularly effective was Dazed and Confused magazine, and this is why it was the main inspiration for my magazine. The front covers had daring, exciting and colourful images, and this was something I felt I would like to replicate in my magazine. Also, there was not too much writing on the front cover. The main focus was on the image. However, there were still enough cover lines for the reader to see the main content. I felt this magazine was extremely effective, and that is why I tried to replicate some of its forms and conventions. In my research, I also found that there were specific themes or colour schemes running throughout the magazines. Therefore, in my preliminary task, I placed a large photograph of two people, used a banner across the front, and inserted a logo in the top left-hand corner. I also made sure the text was the same colour to ensure a theme throughout. I did not do much editing to the photograph, and believe it would have looked better if I had done. I therefore practiced using Photoshop for the images on my final coursework piece, so that I could make them look better. I'm extremely pleased with what I've learnt on Photoshop, as I've gone from using a photograph straight off the camera, with the only editing being a crop tool, to using Photoshop to manipulate the image, including brightness and contrast, cutting around the image, using layer tools and refining edges to make the photos look professional. I also did a lot more research into music magazines, and found themes that were apparent throughout them. This was beneficial as I was able to look more closely at the magazines and why they were the way they were, rather than me just arranging text and images on a page at random. This is why I feel my final coursework piece has been a success. It's been changed and improved many times, and I've kept tweaking it right up until the deadline to make sure it was professional and perfect, as I wanted it to have the conventions of music magazines, but also my own individual twist. I have learnt many skills on InDesign, which have helped me greatly to produce my contents page and double page spread. I spent lots of time researching contents pages of different magazines, in particular Dazed and Confused once again. I wanted to ensure my contents page had lots of content that looked professional and provided the reader with all the information they needed without making it look cluttered. I believe I have achieved this, and that my contents page is effective in what I wanted it to do. I also researched double page spreads, and saw that mostly there was either one large image that took up a whole page, with the other being covered with text, or the text was intertwined with smaller main images and other insert images. I found my favourite double page spreads were the ones with a smaller main image and other insert images. I felt this was more interesting to read as the text was broken up with pictures. I also saw the convention of using pull quotes, which I utilised in my double page spread, and I was pleased with how it turned out, as I felt it had enough content to be appealing, but did not overload the reader with things to look at, making it more attractive to read rather than skip over. Overall, I believe I've come on leaps and bounds from what I produced in my preliminary task, as I now understand in depth the forms and conventions of magazines and why it is that they are created in certain ways, and I believe I've replicated these forms and conventions whilst further developing my skills on software such as Photoshop and InDesign to produce a professional looking magazine with my own personal twist.